Hello, and I'm Mr.C, and welcome back to Lesson 2 of the Year 3 coding series. Today we're going to be coding in Scratch, and we're going to be looking at repeat blocks. So last lesson we were looking at how to get Scratch move around on the stage using simple inputs. And today we're going to look at how we can create repeat blocks to mean that when we press a single input, when we press one button, a whole bunch of things happen as in sequence. Instead of having to press lots and lots of buttons to control everything all the time, can you even imagine if somebody had to press a button for every single action a computer took? It would be ludicrous, wouldn't it? So that's why we have lots and lots of repeat blocks going along. Now these are called subroutines, little programs within your program. So when you press this one button, then a whole load of code starts to trigger in order, and then it stops. And we can also build these to be really efficient so that we ask one little set of things to happen so many times, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. Let's go and shoot back over to Scratch and have a look at what we did last lesson. So as you can see, this is what we did last lesson. In our lesson 1 we were looking at using these events, and these events were inputs. We were using the keyboard to input movement. So when I press a button, I wanted Scratch to move. Let's just knuckle down and have a look at what some of these actually mean. So the first one here, it says when I click on the green flag, which means when I start my program, put the pen down. Now in Scratch, you've got to imagine that the sprite Scratch is putting a marker pen down where he stands, and whenever you move him about the screen, he's going to keep that on the ground. It's much like if I ask you to put your pen on the ground now, on the carpet, and ask you then to move around the room. You would make a horrible mess of the carpet because the pen would go all over the carpet. It's much the same in Scratch. Now Scratch is going to keep the pen down until we tell him to take the pen up, and if we don't, he'll just keep it down all the time. But we've got the pen down there. And next, let's have a look at the next block of code and read that and understand what it means. So it says the event is when I press the right arrow key. Okay, so on the keyboard I press the right arrow key, point in a direction 90. Now that might sound a bit confusing, but in Scratch when I click on it, it shows me it's pointing right. That's 90 degrees. So when I press the arrow key right, I want Scratch to point right and then move 10 steps. So this is going to mean that it's going to make Scratch move 10 steps right when I press it. Oh, and lastly it says next costume. So that means it's going to cycle through the costumes, one costume each time I press right. And the effect of that is to make it look like it's animated and he's walking. So let's have a think today about what we're going to do. Today we're going to be thinking about how we can create an input and a whole chain of events happen from that one input. You can see here, this is the sort of thing that you might do, and we're going to be using a repeat block to make sure that I don't have to write it out 4 times. I can just say, hey, do this one thing 4 times. Much like if I was programming a robot to walk, I wouldn't go, move your left leg, now move your right leg, now move your left leg, now move your right leg, now move your left leg, move your right leg. I would just say, move your left leg and then your right leg, and then I would put that in a repeat loop and say, I'd like you to do that 10 times. Much quicker. So let's hop right in. Our challenge today is going to be use a repeat block, but to get them to draw some shapes. So this could be to start with, we'll start with some simple geometric shapes, but then it could be that you draw all sorts of shapes just at the press of a button. Last week's challenge was draw a house, and when you press the button, today you could program it so when you press a button he just draws a whole house just straight away. How cool would that be? A little extra challenge is you can create some of your own buttons that do all kinds of things in your little own subroutines. So let's have a look. Let's jump back into Scratch. So just to get set up, you can copy this screen, press pause and copy this screen if your program you have lost this from last lesson. And just a quick reminder, if you haven't got the pen tools on the left hand side, then click here, click on pen tools, and it should be available for you. Now, what's really useful, I've programmed an input here, so when I press C, it clears the screen. But you can see when I click on the green flag, my program's working. It's good to test your program as you go along. I can draw a square like that. Okay, oh, that's pretty cool. I've drawn a square. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a single input to be able to draw a square, which means when I press one button, let's say the button S, I'm going to press S on the keyboard, it's going to create a square. So how am I going to do that? Well, the event that I'm talking about here is the event. So the event I'm looking for is when I press a button. And we've said that when I press the button S, I want to create a square. Now, to create a square, what Scratch needs to do is he needs to have the pen down, but we've already got the pen down, so that's okay. He needs to move forwards, and then he needs to turn 90 degrees. So I'm going to click on motion, and I'm going to make him move forwards. Now 10's not a very big space, so I'm going to say move forwards, let's say 60 steps. And then he needs to turn around, because I've done one side of the square, but a square's got 4 sides. So then I'm going to turn around, and it needs to be a right angle turn, which is of course 90 degrees. So at the moment when I press S, he does one side of the square, press it again, he does the other side. So if I press that button 4 times, it creates a square. But I can do better than that, because what I could do is right click on this and then paste it there. So if I right click and duplicate, and then right click and duplicate, it's a long process doing it, isn't it? So here we go. I've got, when I press the S button, it's going to move, then turn, move, then turn, move, then turn, move, then turn. And this should, therefore, when I press one button, create a square. Let's have a look. Oh, that's quite fun actually. So I'll go over here, I'll create a square there, I'll create a square there, and a square there. Now what I could do, if I wanted to, I could make the square a bit bigger by making the movement that Scratch does even bigger than that. Now if I was making a square, I couldn't change the degrees, because there has to be 90 degrees in the corner of a square, 90 degrees of turn. But what I could do is, instead of having all of this just to make a square, I could make this code better by saying, you know what, all I'm asking you to do is move forwards and then turn 90 degrees. I'm asking you to do that 4 times, as we already established. And instead of writing that out 4 times, instead, what I could do is, let's get rid of that. That's not very efficient. I'm going to go on to control, and I've got a repeat block here. So what we're saying is, in this little repeat block, anything inside this little sandwich gets repeated. So what happens is, and we don't want it repeated 10 times, we want it repeated 4 times. So when I press S, what it's saying is, do this stuff 4 times over. Move forwards, turn 90 degrees. Wait, that's 1 time. Move forwards, turn 90 degrees, go back to the top. That's 2 times. Move forwards, turn 90 degrees, that's 3 times. Move forwards, turn 90 degrees, that's 4 times. Done. Then stop. So that's what the repeat block does. It says keep doing what is inside here this many times. Okay, and it just means you don't have to write all of this stuff out. Imagine you were trying to get Scratch to do 100 movements in one. Okay, maybe if you draw an intricate house, there might be 100 things he has to do. Well, some of those you might bubble up in a little repeat block, so that you don't have to write 100 separate lines of code to do those little details. And the windows could get drawn by themselves. So let's just check that this works. I'm going to get rid of this one, and now I've got a little repeat block that I can just press one button. It draws a square. S. Boom. Kapow. 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 I'm going to press clear to get rid of all of that. It does help, like I said earlier, if you've got a clear button, so when your screen gets full, you can clear things. But now we've established how we can use repeat blocks to do fun things. What you can do is now you can go and create some of your own repeat blocks, and you can also go and create some of your own inputs that do a whole load of different things. So you could start off by just changing how big the square is. So I'm going to turn that to, let's say I'm going to change it to 100, okay? And I'll just change that for one moment. And when I press S, it should make a bigger square. There we go. Or I could change that to just 10 and press S and make a tiny little square. Oh, there's one, look. It's a baby square. So that's one of the things that I could do. Now you could toy around with the degrees of change, but of course it won't make an entire square. But you could also start playing around with putting repeat blocks within repeat blocks. Now that is some kind of crazy. Let's have a look at something I prepared earlier. Now I've said when I press the J key, let's just break this apart. Does this look familiar? This is my little algorithm for making a square. So I'm going to repeat move 60, turn 90, move 60, turn 90, move 60, turn 90, move 60, turn 90. And I've made a square. But what I'm saying is, I want you to make that square, that makes a square. I'm going to put that in here. So the moment it says repeat 20 times, make a square. The thing is, he's just going to make that square in that one spot. What I want him to do is I want him to move to a new spot and then create another square, and then move to another spot and make another square, move to another spot and make another square, to make some patterns. So what I'm going to do, and this I've got from the motion blocks here, I'm going to turn, degrees of turn. It doesn't have to be 30 degrees, you can toy around with that. I'm just putting that here, so make a square, and then you're going to turn around a little bit. I've made it 30 degrees, you can experiment with other amounts of degrees, and then I've said just move 10, okay? So what's going to happen here, when I press J, it's going to repeat this 20 times, so it's going to say make a square, it's going to do this, it's going to do this 4 times, make a square, then turn, then move 10 steps somewhere else, then make another square, then turn, then move 10 steps somewhere else, then make another square, and do that 20 times over. Just imagine if I put that all in one big long line of code, it would take ages. So I can have a lot of fun with this now. So when I press J, he suddenly constructs these wonderful patterns, and I can change the degrees to make even more fun patterns. Let's have a look. I'll change that to 40 degrees, and I'll make that 20 and see what happens there. There we go. Go there. So, once you've mastered using repeat blocks, there's all sorts of different things that you can do. What I'd like you to do is make sure you can make a square. Here's a challenge. Why not make a different shape? Have a go at making a triangle, or have a go at making a regular pentagon, or have a go at making a rectangle. There are all sorts of different shapes that you can make. And the second thing is, play around with your repeat blocks. Get Scratch to do a whole bunch of things when you press one input on one button.